This happened a while ago. Not entirely sure why I chose to talk about it now, though. I kinda do. I'll explain later. I have a bit of a bad habit of dozing off on the train. I don't blame it entirely on myself. My place of employment necessitates that I work long, hard, and obscure hours. More often than not, I find myself taking the very last train home at around 2 a.m. My stop's at the end of the line, so my whole trip takes me about 35 minutes. And of course, I'm tired as hell by the end of it. Also, sometimes I get drunk. It happens. It's not like I want to fall asleep. I mean, I could get pickpocketed, or worse. It is what it is. Nobody's perfect. But it usually isn't a problem. Like I said, my stop's at the end of the line, so the driver would always wake me up when he comes by to do his inspection of the cars. This has become such a routine that I know each and every one of the nighttime drivers by face. There's only 3, though. Not much of a feat. And one of them's quiet, a gruff-looking gentleman in his mid-50s. One's even older, South Asian man, appearing to be in his 60s at least. The last guy was younger, probably mid-20s. This guy's always extremely messy hair. The roster of drivers had remained the same for the past 3 to 4 years, all super nice guys, mind you. I had no reason to complain. I knew these people, and I was comfortable with them. I expected to see them. So you can imagine my shock when I woke up to see an unfamiliar face staring down at me one night. I'd been out drinking. I was about 2 or 3 beers away from throwing up my insides. Safe to say I'm not in the most alert state. It was still a jarring sight nonetheless. And this guy must have stared at me for 10 seconds straight without saying a word. His appearance certainly didn't help either. I'm not one to judge on looks, but this dude, he was beyond freaky. You ever seen Lost Highway? Remember that phone call scene with the mystery man? That's roughly what he resembled. I'm a bit younger, though. His face was nearly ghostly pale. His eyes were wide and beady. His smile was unsettling at best, and insanity-inducing at worst. On top of that, there was a hole in his neck. A fucking hole. And I could see straight through it. "You've reached the end of the line," he said. His voice was normal enough, especially given his throat. But his tone sounded like the one a child would make when he knew about something that his friend didn't. Yeah, sorry. Guess I dozed off again. It took all the strength I had not to focus on his neck hole. Especially if the other option I had was to look into his eyes. He stopped leering at me and stood straight. He must have been about 6'6" or 2 meters tall. Also strangely muscular for his height. An intimidating presence, to say the least. He stood still for a moment, trapping me in place, and I was expecting him to say something after all. But he didn't. Instead, he just took off. After taking a second to adjust to the weirdness, I got off and began walking to the doors. I'd never been more ready to go home at that point, but the door didn't open. I pressed the button, but nothing happened. What the hell? I muttered, concern starting to rise in my chest. It hadn't even been 15 seconds since the driver got off. It didn't take long for me to start shoulder checking the door, and then I started yelling. There were only 2 options in my mind at this point. The door better open the fuck up, and this train better not start fucking moving. It was my lucky day, because none of those things happened. "Hello? Driver?" I yelled as the train departed. What the fuck? I'm still here!" Unfortunately, I was in one of the middle cars, so he couldn't hear me. One of my coworkers, Alan, had been on the train with me before I passed out. I also knew for a fact that he also got off at the end of the line, but I was alone. He was nowhere to be seen. I continued slamming on the doors and pressing the emergency stop button, but one thing was quickly becoming certain. This thing wasn't stopping. I sat down and I resigned to my sudden fate. What the hell's going on? I thought to myself. The situation was truly bizarre. The driver would have had to sprint to the cab, prevent the doors from opening, and then drive off. This is all with the knowledge that some guy might still be on the train. What the fuck was his problem? Truth be told, I had no idea where the trains went after hours. I just hoped that it wouldn't be too far. After all, my city wasn't huge, and the tracks had to end at some point. I looked out the windows, but it was mostly dark. A few buildings still had lights on, but not many. Not surprising in the dead of night. I tried calling Alan, but he wouldn't pick up. I cursed again. 15 minutes passed, and I was starting to lose it. What the hell is this shit? I thought. We were approaching the edge of the city. I was 99% certain that the tracks did not extend this far. I felt like I was having a fever dream. My hands were shaking. I was on the brink of hyperventilating. To combat that, I closed my eyes and I started taking deep breaths. It's fine. It's alright, I thought. Driver's just a fucking idiot. I mean, maybe I'll be compensated for this shit show. Yeah. Free transit for a year. I mean, that's the least they could offer me. After calming myself down, I opened my eyes back up. It was still dark. I nearly screamed in frustration. I felt around me, confirming that I was definitely still on the train. Why are the lights off? It sounded like we were going through a tunnel, but even tunnels had lights. None of them were pitch black all the way through. Something else bothered me as well, the vague sensation of a presence sitting right across from me. I sat utterly still for what felt like 5 minutes. Eventually, the train lights came back on. It was still empty. Even my mind was starting to play tricks on me. I looked out the window, but it was still black. I took my phone out and dialed 911. It rang a few times before someone picked up. "Hello?" I said. "Hello?" Nothing, just breathing on the other end. "Can you say something?" I screamed into the phone. Somebody finally responded, but it was in a language I couldn't recognize. Not just one I didn't understand. I mean, I knew what French sounds like, even though I can't speak it. But I'd never heard this dialect before in my entire life. I could only describe it as serpent-like. The mere sound of it made my skin feel like something was slithering beneath it. I hung up and I buried my face in my hands. "This is not happening. This is not happening," I muttered to myself. I repeated this, hoping that it would cause me to wake up. Didn't really feel like a dream, but then again, we don't really know what dreams feel like, do we? Soon enough, the train came to a stop. I was glad, of course, but at the same time, I wasn't exactly excited to find out where the hell I was. I looked out the window. I think my heart nearly stopped. I didn't know what the hell I was supposed to be looking at. It almost resembled a desert, but a post-apocalyptic one. Everything was gray, including the sky. There were gigantic trees scattered throughout, along with massive vortex-like pits. Large, hunched figures were wearing baggy black robes that dragged themselves across the sand. I couldn't tell from so far, but it almost looked like they had beaks coming out of their faces. "We've arrived." I jumped at the sudden outburst. I turned around, seeing the driver standing at the door, smiling at me. "Where the fuck am I?" He angled his head and grinned even wider. "You'll want to get off before they get on," he said. "The next station is not for you. You have 1 hour before your returning train arrives. Have fun exploring." He started to leave, but turned back before he did. "Also, don't go out into the desert." This time, the door stayed open after he left. The place we arrived at looked more or less like a regular station, if not a bit outdated. It was also gray, just like the desert outside. There were also people sitting on benches just outside the train. Well, I suppose they were people. They looked just like the driver, pale, holes in throats, oddly tall, well-built. One of them suddenly got up and began approaching the train. I remembered what the driver had told me, and immediately I got off. From there, I ran the length of the train. I finally spotted him in the driver's cab. I pounded on his window, managing to catch his attention. "Hey, what the hell's going on?" I asked him through the glass. I wasn't sure if he didn't hear me, or if he was just being a huge asshole, but he just grinned at me and waved. Seconds later, he just started driving, leaving me in that godforsaken place. At the very least, the station was now empty. I walked over and I sat on one of the benches. I took out my phone and I tried checking the time. Yeah, I say tried, because everything on my screen was now in gibberish, presumably the language that I'd heard earlier. 1 hour. I just had to wait for 1 hour and then I'd be back. Or I'd wake up. Hopefully the latter. But before it even felt like 5 minutes, something wandered onto the platform. I didn't look over at it, however, I was sure as hell this thing was looking at me. From the corner of my eye, it appeared like one of those hunched figures that had been out in the desert. I saw it shift in place before it started squawking like some kind of fucked up demon bird. I left almost immediately as it did. So much for my plan of sitting still. I saw a set of stairs go up and headed towards it. Once up, I found myself in what looked like a regular terminal. Just like the platform was a bit off. I mean, the architecture was hard to identify. Definitely unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It was almost retro and futurist at the same time, with large banners and monitors displaying strange symbols set up just about everywhere. It's like they hired a doomsday cult to design the place. The place was populated by more of those neckhole people. Thankfully, they didn't seem to acknowledge me. I decided to walk around for a while, hoping the hunched things would be gone once I headed back. Maybe a minute later, everybody stopped and directed death stares at me. Their expressions were so full of malice, I could feel my skin begin to crawl. I noticed that some of the eyes weren't directed at me, but at the space behind me. I slowly turned my head, seeing the hunched creature had followed me up. I got a good look at it this time, and I'll probably never forget the sight of it. And I was right, it had a beak, a large one. Its face nearly resembled some kind of alien bird-human hybrid. I stood still and I began silently praying, not sure for what exactly. Almost in unison, the people opened their mouths at an unnervingly wide degree, and they began screaming, as if this was a nightmare. This would have been the moment that I woke up, but I didn't. The people began boxing me in, still screaming like damn banshees. And I'd take a step forward, the crowd would move with me. The creature was also so hot on my trail the entire time. Eventually I just started running. I tried breaking through the crowd a few times, but I would just get pushed in another direction. And after some time of this, I was pinballed out of the terminal entirely. These bastards had directed me into the desert, along with the hunched creature. And once I was out, they stopped screaming. They shut the terminal door behind them. The creature began squawking again before lurching at me, and I could do nothing but run as it chased me. And soon enough, every single creature in the vicinity was also on my ass. It was like a nightmarish chain reaction. There were numerous times where I nearly ran into one of those swirling pits, and there was definitely something dwelling inside them. I could hear it, the sickening, slithering sounds of something large within. There was no end in sight. It was obvious that I couldn't run forever, and the creatures started getting closer. And I could see them up close. Their beaks were wide open with long, spiky tongues hanging out of them. The sight of it pushed me to continue running, but I wasn't superhuman. My lungs gave out before my legs did, but right before that, I could see a figure walking towards me. Not one of those hunched things. It was something familiar. But I passed out before I could find out. When I woke up, I was back on the train. I reeked of sweat and my joints ached, but I was nevertheless happy to be alive. But what the hell happened, I thought. I told you not to go into the desert. I looked over, seeing the driver once again standing by the door. Look, I didn't really have a choice. What the fuck's wrong with this place? I said. The driver raised an eyebrow at me. I thought you would have come better prepared. That's usually the case. Better prepared? I asked, taken aback by the statement. What the hell are you talking about? I never planned on being here. Whatever the goddamn hell this place is. This time, he was the one to look confused. Is that so? Well, I doubt you found this place on accident. Maybe something else is going on. Once you're back in your world, I advise you to be careful. This is a dangerous game to play. Well, I'd better be going. Wait, I said. Why did you save me? It is strange, he responded. I usually wouldn't bother with it, but you were different. Not cocky like the others. It was a breath of fresh air, and I appreciated it. He walked off the train, leaving me with about 1,000,000 questions. I didn't bother chasing after him, but at that point, I didn't have the will or energy for it. I just sat tight. Soon enough, the train started moving. Just like they had on the way there, the lights went out again. But it wasn't a problem, because soon enough the train arrived at the end of the line. The actual end of the line. I checked my phone, it was in English, now displaying 2:15 a.m. I couldn't understand how such a little time had passed, but then again, I didn't understand a lot of things from that night. And when I went to work the following Monday, I was still in a state of relative shock. I didn't want to believe what had happened, but it certainly wasn't a fucking dream. Maybe my drink got spiked at the bar or something. Talk about a delayed reaction, right? But deep down, I knew that any kind of reasoning I could conjure up was just a cope. It was an inexplicable event. I just had to accept that and never fall asleep on the train again. I saw Alan at lunch that day. I was tempted to say something about what had happened, but opted not to. I didn't want to be that crazy guy at work, after all. Totally sorry for giving you the slip Saturday, man, he told me. I had to get off at an earlier stop. My sister lives downtown. She was having some kind of emergency, like, geez, right? He chuckled. I just nodded. Anyway, he continued, anything interesting happen on the train? I didn't like his tone with that question. I mean, it was almost like he already knew the answer, and he just wanted to hear me say it. Also, if I'd been asleep, then why the hell would he have not woken me up before he left? I mean, something wasn't right. No, nothing noteworthy, no. You know how boring the city is. His smile faded. Okay. Why do you ask? He shook his head. Oh, no reason. Just glad you made it home safe. I mean, that conversation shouldn't have been anything substantial. But given the circumstances, it made me wonder. I've been working from home for a few weeks now, so I haven't seen him since, but he sent me a text last night. Hey man, let's go out once this is all over. Go crazy. You down? I put my phone down and I thought about what the driver had told me. I doubt that you found this place by accident. And I'm starting to think I didn't. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I wanted to wish you a very well, we're getting close to October. Are you as excited as I am? Also, thank you for watching tonight's video, or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast, if you're listening on Spotify. We're getting further and further into the fall, and closer to those Halloween horror months, which means that if you want to find your nice Halloween horror audiobook to listen to this year, check out audible.com and look for MrCreepyPasta, because I got a whole bunch of books over there. Books like Tales from the Gas Station. Also, I want to give a very big thank you to all of my Patreons over there on Patreon, because you guys have helped me out quite a bit. I'm not even quite a bit. You guys are honestly, you guys pulled me out of an incredibly dark place when I first had to look at moving and all of the demon stuff that YouTube does, and thank you guys very dearly for all the help that you've given me. People like Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Bryon Arce, Bobby Karman, Stephanie Butler, Tristain Pelton, Chase Burnett, Diana Kraus, Raven Mitz, Satanic Aries, Ness69420, aisodoehtraed, Pain, Nessie, Blitzscreed, BardoHawk764, Melancholy Corpse, Ferb, Harley, Billy Morrow, Madam Skullbunny, Sashi Sazaku, @Grizzly Olsen Pro, Kayden the Spooky Boy, Zane Nightshade, MyBodySoundsLikeRiceKrispys, Ashwood, Lord of the Weebs, Jay, Faye Lockett, Miss Xander, Mr. Unsettling Spaghetti, Suji Campbell, Azarine Fox, Robert White, Fried Chicken 12, James Bruce, Freddy Krueger, Ty Nanny, Michael Scarborough, Infernal One, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Jordan Nels, Hades Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Cryptic Nightmares, Kiwi the Sloth, Tommy Green, Liam Newman, Sky Harbor, Caleb Dougal, Nina Smith, Nico Kyle, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, Trace Miles, and Corey Kenshin. Once again, thank you all so much to everyone who is in this list of names that I mispronounce, and everyone who's in the description and everyone who supports me at patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. I can't thank you guys enough for listening, for watching, and I wish you all sweet dreams. Good night, everyone.